you for braving all the barricades and the pea soup weather and for this opportunity to be together. So first of all, my name is Jamie Wen-Besson. I am a Senior Gender Program Manager with the International Union for Conservation of Nature. And we at IUCN, we are very proud co-conveners of GEDA together with our partners over at WEDO. And so first of all, thank you to the audience again for braving the weather, braving the security conditions to make it here for this discussion. We hope it's really fruitful and really engaging and inspiring. And also, I'd be remiss not to also specifically thank Katie for organizing today's event. And also, of course, the Population Council for graciously hosting us in their beautiful facility. So also, let's do a round of applause for that. Why are we here today? I think today is a great opportunity for us to take stock together and to reflect on what we've achieved as an alliance, but more as a community, and also to celebrate the amazing work that the GEDA members have been doing at the nexus of gender, environment, and data. Just a little bit of harkening back, 2 years ago, GEDA was officially launched at UNGA, actually, and we started as 17 founding organizations, and today we're a hub of nearly 100 organizations from around the globe and 27 data advisors. And all of us, we are working very hard to enhance the production and use of gender and environment data. But I think that our value is that together we're greater than the sum of our collective parts. And we can exert the influence to ensure that gender and environment data is produced and used with a feminist and participatory lens that leaves no one behind. And so we're doing really important work. Just as a quick example, in our initial months of operations as GEDA consultants under the leadership of WEDO found that 92% of academic publications on gender and the environment are specifically analyzing challenges that are faced by 82 countries among the global majority. And yet the authorship of those studies predominantly comes from the global north. So we're really proud that recently we've been able to select and award some small grants that GEDA is working to address this intersection and this issue. And these organizations will be receiving funding to help us fill the gender and environment data gap. One of them is, of course, here tonight, Ruta del Clima, and you'll be hearing from them as well. And we'll also actually be hopefully sharing another announcement of another organization that will help take the lead on a GEDA gender and environment dashboard indicator soon. So today's event is about bridging data and action in the lead up to COP29. And last year, GEDA co-conveners, IUCN and WEDO, and also we joined UN Women colleagues and the UNFCCC Secretariat, the COP28 presidency, and also the UN high-level climate champions team to host the first global conference on gender and environment data. That conference led to a call to action that called on policymakers, leaders, key actors to urgently prioritize the production and use of gender and environment data, and also to do so and utilize this information in ethical and transparent ways to increase investments at this intersection and to also encourage and strengthen multi-stakeholder partnerships and inclusivity of data governance processes themselves. We're so excited to share that we were able to weave the insights of and expertise of so many of you, the GEDA Alliance, throughout those sessions. And we're also really proud to share that that call to action is living on. And actually, it'll be picked up next month at COP16 for the Convention of Biological Diversity in Colombia, as well as through Katie's representation, the World Data Forum at the end of this year. And so today, what we really want to talk about is how the Alliance members are getting ready for COP29. And just as a really quick, small microcosm of an example, right now the parties are, of course, under the UNFCCC updating their NDCs. They are completing their work to review the legal work program on gender, as well as the gender action plan. And we've all heard about the need for more data to focus on national implementation and to enhance transparency and accountability. So just as a small kind of example of how the membership and how we all work together, IUCN, we're partnering with UN Women, who we have some colleagues in the back, so you can pick their brains later, and also with the Deepshikha Institute at Binghamton University to develop a gender inequality and climate policy scorecard that will be designed to not just measure climate policies and plans against the lived realities of women and girls across 5 dimensions, but also our goal is actually to plan implementation to see if action and investment is following commitments. And so what I can also share is that we've also had a lot of examples of working together. Data2X has put together some climate policy briefs and drawing in the review and the insights of GEDA members. And then we also, of course, had the GEDA Alliance working together to produce a brief, for example, on intersectional data that was presented and pushed at SB60 a couple of months ago. So with all of this, kind of a theme of collaboration in mind, let's turn to tonight's event and reception. Let's learn more about each other's work, how we can further build synergies on top of what we're doing. And let's also use the reception at the end of this evening to discuss how we can together weave our efforts a little bit tighter and closer. We are a powerful alliance of many, many organizations and experts. We can exert influence, and tonight offers us the opportunity to elaborate plans. So without further ado, I'd like to pass the mic to Katie from WEDO to moderate the panel and let the scheming begin.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Yeah, that's not gonna work. There we go. Really excited to be here tonight. I'm Katie Tobin from WEDO. And we know that we are here on the margins of UN General Assembly of the Summit of the Future, where we're witnessing an increasing demand for global cooperation and for guidance around both our digital futures and the democratic deficits of our present. GEDA's members operate and intervene in a landscape that's increasingly dominated by AI, by big data, by the role of big tech, and at the same time, a context of closing civic space and ever-increasing resource constraints in the context of climate crisis, genocide, military hegemony, and conflict. Where gender is considered, it's so often through the lens of gender mainstreaming, rather than what we would want to see, which is deliberate and concerted attention to measuring and then to understanding the unique lived realities of women, girls, and gender diverse people. And this year, as Jamie was telling us, as the UNFCCC is negotiating a new benchmark for climate finance, as countries are putting together their updated NDCs to outline how they'll respond to the climate crisis at national level, when we're collectively attempting to outline what's required for a gender-just energy transition, we know that data and the work of GEDA and our members is ever more vital. So this evening, we'll hear from a stellar group of GEDA members who are working at the global and national levels, envisioning new methodologies for data collection and indicators, and seeking to transform the landscape of feminist climate justice and of open data. So we'll have 2 brief panels. The panelists are all going to sit together at the front. The first one's going to be focused on the broader landscape for gender and environment data, and that will be followed by 2 deep dives from GEDA members, including one of the recipients of GEDA's first round of small grants, as Jamie was saying. And then the second hour of our time together is going to be our networking reception, so make sure you stick around for that. We have a little activity to get us to talk to each other at the beginning, but hopefully it won't be too nerdy or painful. And you can skip it if you really want to. So I would like to invite the panelists to come sit, and I'll introduce them in a second. Thank you for being here. Okay, so our first panel, all right, second panelist, you can stay in your seats for now if you prefer. No, it's good. So the first panel on the gender and environment data landscape, we're going to hear first from Katherine Quaid in the middle, who's the Communications and Outreach Coordinator at WECAN, Women's Earth and Climate Action Network. Right? And then from Francesca Perucci, all the way on the left, who's the Director of Policy and Partnerships at Open Data Watch. And then from Deepshikha Sharma, who's the Director of Climate Sciences at the Population Council Consulting, based in India, the part of PopCats. So starting with Katherine, if you can tell us, what is the role of feminist advocacy in creating gender responsive, or maybe someday even gender transformative climate policy, particularly in the UNFCCC, and how does WECAN view data as part of that landscape?
Thanks, Katie. Hi. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Katie. Thanks for coming here at the end of a climate week. I know there's a lot of stuff going on every day. And yeah, appreciate you all kind of making time to spend the evening here on these topics. As Katie said, my name is Katherine. I'm a citizen of the Confederated Tribes of Umatilla, which is located in the northern part of the United States. And I'm also the communications coordinator for the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network, WECAN, which is a climate justice organization working to unite women in all their diversity in a global movement for social and ecological justice. And just as we start kind of discussing, the topics for today, I really want to keep in mind, that data is vital for our work. It's offering precise information about, what's really actually happening on the ground, ecologically and socially, as the climate crisis escalates, as well as providing that context of who is being impacted and how. And it's also that these data points and these numbers, sorry, I'm trying to figure out the right angle here. Is that okay? Okay. These numbers correlate to real people and to real communities and to people whose lives are being impacted every day by the climate crisis. And as someone working in communications, this is always a bridge that I'm, walking across and bringing forward is all of these frontline communities that we work with and who are working very hard to protect their communities, their territories, and their ecosystems within this climate crisis, and that this data is about them and it is about these real people and these real communities. And so wanting to keep that in mind, that these aren't just numbers, these are single people all across the world having these impacts. And at WECAN, we have many programs and campaigns specifically focused on women-led climate solutions globally. And since our founding, we have actively participated within and outside of the UNFCCC process, advocating for climate justice, gender responsive climate policies, the Gender Action Plan, Indigenous rights, racial and economic justice, and bold, meaningful action on the climate crisis. And we do this by sharing both qualitative and quantitative data within our advocacy. We're doing this, we're committed to ensuring a feminist agenda by, having frontline grassroots and Indigenous women from around the world as a part of our delegations to the COPs, ensuring that they're there to represent themselves, their demands, their solutions, their policy ideas. And that's sort of the qualitative side of what we're bringing when we're coming to the UNFCCC is how can we get their stories, their expertise, their knowledge in front of these policymakers, in front of the decision makers, making sure they are the decision makers within the negotiations with these government officials. And then quantitatively, we're also presenting reports and analysis that are furthering our policy asks, if you will, and uplifting that gender disaggregated data that is needed to advance our gender responsive climate policy, and really pushing to consider a feminist analysis across the negotiations. Just yesterday, during one of our Climate Week events, we actually released, here I have a little photo of it, 1 second. We released a recommendations and policy document for governments to consider for their NDCs, which includes, a ton of just gender disaggregated data and research that's really focused on really specific policy asks around gender responsive policies, Indigenous rights, biodiversity, fossil fuel phase out, and a just transition. And we're using that data, again, because we know what our policy demands are. They're very clear, actually, and we need this data to, further demonstrate to, oh, I found it, there we go. We have a little QR code for later. To demonstrate to governments what needs to be done and why and how. And we've also released a report recently that's over 150 pages on the gendered and racial impacts of the fossil fuel industry that is used pretty regularly by frontline leaders, policymakers, academics, and health professionals to truly understand how fossil fuels are impacting women in unique and egregious ways. And again, looking at that intersectional approach, not only gender, but also the racial impacts. And, you know, this is going to be used again at the UNFCCC when we're talking about a feminist, fast, fair, feminist, and funded fossil fuel phase out. And how are we going to do that, and who's impacted by those fossil fuels, and why we need to do that immediately and urgently. Additionally, WECAN is a member of the Women and Gender constituency. I want to give a shout out because, you know, this is a really wonderful collective of feminist organizations within the UNFCCC. I know that I've learned so much being a part of that for the last 5 years, and it's actually one of the places where I draw the most inspiration to see all the different ways that we have knowing and expertise, and how we can collectively come together to learn and share with each other too. I think there's something very feminist in the approach in which we're collectively organizing within that space. And also that, you know, within that organizing, we are bringing a feminist analysis to our global climate policy spaces to address also the root causes of the climate crisis, namely patriarchy, colonization, racism, and capitalism, which are also perpetuating gender inequality in addition to the climate crisis. And, you know, within the WGC, we're also calling for an intersectional approach to the negotiations. And I do feel like I've been sort of thinking about the question, Katie, and, you know, thinking about what is data offering, and it really offers us the ability to see some of that nuance and definitely that intersection, and to consider how do we want to strengthen and enhance what we're already asking for when it comes to climate finance, when it comes to fossil fuel phase out, when it comes to the gender action plan, and to really consider, you know, what do we want to do with that, and how are we implementing, right? How can we make really strategic implementation plans that are getting to the people who are being impacted the most, but also the people who are leading the solutions on the ground right now, who are under-resourced and who are doing so much in this time of the climate crisis, and, you know, really leading from that community perspective. So I think there's a lot to be said also, not only about the disproportionate impacts that, you know, women, girls, gender diverse people are experiencing because of the climate crisis, but also how people are leading and what's being effective and strategic, and how we can bring that into the COP spaces and really uplift those solutions, because we are making an impact. All of those small, you know, small, right? We like to call them small because they're unique and they're specific to a community, but those are all building up into significant actions and climate mitigation strategies and climate policies on the ground. And so I think there's something really important that we're bringing into the COP space around what solutions look like. WECAN has a database called Women Speak that has over 1,000 of stories and digital resources that demonstrate those solutions, whether it's biodiversity protection, or, you know, policy making, just transition work, you know, renewables. And it's really demonstrating the significant impact that women and gender diverse people are having in the solution space, but also how it's happening. You know, you can go there and you can see, oh, that's happening in that community. How would that be applicable to my own? So I think, you know, women are on the ground every day in these communities. They're witnessing and experiencing what this overarching data is telling us. And for me in my work, this data, you know, as communications, it's a tool to tell these stories and to honor the work of the individuals represented in these numbers, and to continue strengthening our advocacy collectively to ensure justice and to ensure accountability from governments within the UNFCCC space. And, you know, just looking ahead at COP29, oh my God, embarrassing. You know, we need governments to support a gender disaggregated data, to listen to our calls for gender transformative collective action, for gender just solutions. And quite honestly, we need that at this time and this moment, because it will, I think, help us meet our Paris climate goals. And that's what's gonna be successful COP29, in addition to robust and strong climate finance. So I'm gonna leave that now. I think I spoke for an adequate amount of time, and yeah, I'll let the next folks go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that brought up so much in terms of the role of data in portraying solutions and how we think about qualitative data as well as quantitative. But I'm going to move us along, even though I would love to respond to Francesca, because I think that was a nice segue also. Because so much of what we're trying to do as data and what we're talking about today requires a strong enabling environment for data. So what do you as Open Data Watch see as the key challenges to achieving that? And how can we work collectively? Katherine talked about the sort of collective approach to advance this work as a data community.
Thank you, Katie, and so nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation, and so inspiring to listen to you, Katherine. It's really amazing the work you're doing. So I come from a different angle. I come more from at Open Data Watch, we work on data and statistical systems. So we sort of support countries, we provide policy advice, support in building their capacity, but also we monitor and we look at what's happening around the world in terms of data availability, data openness, data use. And in particular, looking at gender data and the intersection with the environment, I must say, looking at the landscape from what is available in national statistical and data systems, the picture is not very encouraging. So if I look at your goals, the three goals, number one is expanding the information, the availability of the information. So you look, for instance, at the Sustainable Development Goals, when you look at data availability, just simply for the indicators that are used to monitor, let alone what you need to have in terms of informing policy and action, right? But when you look at the indicators, goal 5 on gender equality and all the other areas related to environment are the ones with the least availability on the indicators. And what we do at Open Data Watch, we also measure openness and availability, as I said, through an index, right? We look at ODIN, which is the availability, the openness and availability of all data in general. But we have now developed, with the same methodology, something to understand the availability and openness of gender data in particular. And again, when you look at the environment, among all the categories that we assess on the availability and openness of gender data, environment is the one, the area with the least availability and the least openness. And then you look at what particular parts of the world are the ones that are struggling the most with lack of data. Those are the most vulnerable countries. For instance, the small island development states, both in the Caribbean and the Pacific, are the ones with the least availability and the least openness. So the question is why, right? Obviously, I think we all know that both gender data and environment data have never been sufficiently prioritized in national statistical systems. And we see again, with the analysis that we have for the Gender Data Compact, which is this index, we measure the enabling environment, and we look at legal frameworks, we look at national strategies, we look at plans, etc. And we see that how little gender data and environment data are prioritized in those plans, are mentioned, are really integrated, right? So what can we do? I think there are some very positive trends, and we've just heard, how you can engage with citizens, how can you engage, and you can engage with people, with users, how you can give them data agency, how you can make them part of the whole data value chain. And there are positive trends there, right? What we call the new data sources. One of those sources, and it's just been recently also recognized officially by the official statistical community, is the what we call citizen-generated data, or more broadly, citizen data. Because within citizen data, you have a lot of different approaches, like from citizen science and different levels of involvement of citizens. But I think what is important there in this new sort of approach to how you look at data is how you make those, for those who are affected by the specific issues you're trying to measure, you give them agency, and they are part of the data collection. They are part of how you decide what needs to be collected, how it's going to be collected, and most importantly, how those data are used, right? How do you make sure that those data that are really affect their lives, as Katherine was so beautifully explaining earlier, how those data can really be used to have the right impact, to inform those actions. And there are positive trends in the sense that more increasingly national statistical offices and in national statistical systems, you see they're making efforts to build more inclusive data systems, right? So citizen-generated data, of course, is one important area, but you see that trend also in how they're changing and adapting their approaches also to traditional data collection methods, like in household surveys, making more participatory, implementing more participatory approaches. You see that in how they propose and try to implement intersectional approaches to data analysis, right? To bring together the lived experiences of each individual, not just a woman or a gender diverse person, but they can be indigenous and gender diverse, they can be indigenous and with disability and face different challenges when it comes to the impact of the environment. So those are all very positive trends and are certainly encouraging. We see a deep transformation of data governance systems, right? A better understanding of what data governance means and what is needed in terms of, again, involving users, involving citizens, making them part of the governance system. So all positive trends, but how do we make sure that those data are used and have an impact, right? Again, openness is a big part of ensuring that data are used properly. And also openness is important because you can get out of that vicious circle of low availability of data and low use and scarce attention and scarce prioritization of data. Once data are open, they are better used, they have more impact, and they demonstrate the value of data, right? So then that in turn create this, what I call a virtuous cycle, where you have better data and more interest from donors, from governments to invest and prioritize data. So that's why openness is important, because openness is not just about open license, right? But it's about making sure that throughout the data value chain, those data are relevant, are the right quality for what is needed, are available, are usable, are accessible, and are used to the maximum potential so that they have the most value, I would say. So openness is important, and we again, we measure that, but as I said, the openness of gender and environment data is very low, still very low. So I would bring here the issue of financing. Why is it low? Why is it not prioritized? What we see is that even where funds are invested in gender equality project or environment project, that does not correspond to equal investment in the data for those particular areas. So there is really a lack of understanding, even from the donor side, of the importance of data in those areas, even when there is good motivation for implementing projects in those particular policy areas. So it's very important to keep that conversation and again demonstrate the value of data for those particular policy areas, so that donors prioritize that and understand the value of data to advance the agenda. So from our point of view of the work we do, we try to use our index and the gender data compass to also advocate and demonstrate what the lack of data does and the impact the lack of openness and lack of availability has, And we try to also advocate for better financing. So we also collect a lot of data on financing in this particular areas. So that's the hope that collectively we can advance the agenda in both in these two areas. And I think the intersectional approach is really important. My hope is that developing a very coherent framework that really tells us how to bring the data together and what data sources are needed and how we can work through both the foundational data systems, the existing traditional data systems, and the new data sources to bring all the data together for the advancement of these important policy areas. Thank you.
Thanks, Francesca. I was really glad to hear you speak about both the intersectional approach and about data use, because those are two major priorities for us as the Gender and Environment Data Alliance. And speaking of data use, turning now to Deepshikha, we would love if you can tell us how data can contribute to more just and equitable climate and health policy and how Population Council approaches these interconnected issues.
Thanks, Katie. And I'm very happy to be a part of this panel, and I'm relatively new to the whole group. So it's quite an amazing to see everybody in person, most of us, and looking forward to work more. So yeah, just to mention that we at Population Council, we have 3 innovation hubs, and one of the innovation hub is specifically dedicated to climate crisis, and we call it, abbreviation is PERC. We call it Population, Environmental Risks and Climate Crisis. And where we actually exemplifies with a data-driven approach. We have, over the past more than 5 years, we have done research into different aspects, different specifically related to climate stressors, environmental risks with the health, because that has been our lineage, and also how it can be linked with the SRH issues. Very, very specifically. I would just like to give some examples because you have put on a very spot on, that how can data lead to more just and equitable climate and health policies. So why do we need data? So definitely, and both Katherine and Francesca has already mentioned about it for the policy making. It is very important if we want to succeed in the MBCs and NAPs and the negotiations. What the government is asking for is data. So it is very, very important to have those data sets. Those numbers are really very important. We can do as many, secondary studies, but ultimately those gaps needs to be filled. Recently, I was interacting with some of the government officials in South Asia, and again, the question was, where is the data set? Give us a data set. So there is a gap. How we are approaching it is, currently we are investing heavily into the research aspect of it. For example, I'll just give some few examples here on what kind of studies we have done. So I don't know if any of you are aware of it. One of our exemplary study is on salinity water inclusion in Bangladesh and on its impacts on maternal health. And it has been notified by various UN agencies as well on that. And there is a demand to, they want to update that study. So there is a demand to scale it up. So that is what numbers do with that. And another example I would like to do, which is currently we are working on, is in the climate-induced migration space, where we are looking at from actually a just energy transition lens. Now this whole net zero carbon thing, which is like, the commitments are there, and there is a huge impact on the just energy transition. The whole value chain is going to change. Now, how it is going to impact, especially the migrant workers in this space. And it's more an exploratory study. What we are trying to do is, it has 2 aspects, both qualitative data and quantitative data. And we are going to invest ourselves in generating big data analysis out of it. So using a lot of AI tools. Currently, we are in initial stages of gathering the data. It is difficult because I think still the standardization process is not there. So it is very difficult to get the segregated data on gender and also on the migrants. It's very, very difficult. And related to the environmental aspects, it's even more like, micro level thing. We can get the data if they're married or they are gone for the jobs, employment opportunities, but have they moved because of the environmental issues? It's very, very difficult. So that is what we are crunching right now. And so we are going to zoom into the different, currently it's in the India, and then we'll be reaching out to the South Asia with that aspect. And another aspect to overlay is that we deep dive into some of the specific states in India to do the qualitative analysis of some of the very focused studies where there are migration happening because of the climate induced, and what are the impacts on the gender? What are the, how the approaches have been gender responsive? What are the different types of mitigation, adaptation measures which have been taken? What are the resilience building measures? And also deep diving into the just energy transition. It's another layer which we are adding. So it becomes very, very, I would say it's very unique study in itself. So yeah, that is one of the examples I would like to give. Apart from that, I would like to also mention on our and Rana is our new president. So just to highlight that. So just to mention on she has a specific focus, and we were just discussing yesterday on humanitarian aspects. So how climate crisis, because we also at council we are working on some of the aspects of humanitarian. So how we can actually crunch that data, what it entails. So our approach is very, very data driven. In terms of bridging the evidence and gaps, and especially also in the urban SRHR space. Now, for example, at PERC, we have done some studies on understanding how urban environments influence the SRH outcomes, which during the climate crisis. For example, the heat stressors, how it is impacting the different vulnerable population. How it takes, like the women are impacted, or what are the different age groups are impacted? What are the different genders? Also, we are working, so other two innovation hubs which we have is one is the Girl Center, and another one is on the gender equity, justice and education, where we work very closely with the adolescent girls, and in the other one, we are working very closely on the educational aspect. So that is also an integration in-house council, which is very unique in itself, that we are working together in all the innovation hubs, and we are trying to see that how the climate, environmental risk and climate crisis is integrated with the other aspects of population dynamics. So yeah, these are some of the examples I would like to give. Another unique example was on the groundwater contamination, which we did studies on that. Of course, leading to a lot of issues during the deliveries, the pregnancies, and going so on and so forth. Now, how we can use these approaches, I think first and foremost is integrating them into the national adaptation plans is the key. It's like very important, and we are also, just to mention that we are also doing a study on the climate finance to see in our Africa office, in Kenya office, in-house study, that to see what kind of data is available, what kind of finance is available in the sides of health, in the sides of gender, in terms of climate. And when I was mapping some of the donors, I realized that the health is the last priority, and gender is cross-cutting, which is like, it is not standalone. So it makes it even more difficult to specifically talk on gender in the data. And yes, there is a huge gap on climate finance and gender issues. And so we are trying to see what are those gaps, what exists, what are there in the NDC's commitments, and considering what are they planning, because a lot of countries have already developed the national adaptation plans, and they're also working on the health adaptation plans and now combining them. So how we can actually see what kind of financial flows will happen, if at all. Although honestly, it's at the last leg right now, because a lot of focus is on the mitigation aspect, net zero commitments, and adaptation aspects in terms of more from the food security and resilience building aspect, which is also equally important, I would say. So yeah, these are some of the things. And I think it is very important to have data in terms of the policy suggestions. If we really want to influence the policies in the countries, and we want to impact in our way, how can we impact the negotiations? For example, Population Council is observer status at UNFCCC. So how we can influence? We can take two routes. One is like through the groups like GEDA and others, or doing our submissions there Second is we work closely with the governments and start talking to them that how they can develop robust frameworks in this space and how we can help with the data aspect on that. So yeah, these are some of the things I would like to mention here. Thanks.
Thanks, Deepshikha. Thank you. So that was a really wonderful landscape analysis from the three of you. So please, if you wouldn't mind, stay here. Don't leave. And Adrián and Peg, if you want to join them on the panel, that would be great. So the next part of our session is we're going to hear, well, all of our speakers are members of GEDA, but this is the spotlighting GEDA members moment, where we're going to hear first from Adrián Martínez Blanco, who's the founder and director of Ruta del Clima. And as I mentioned, one of the awardees of GEDA's first rounds of small grants. And then from Professor Peg Spitzer, who's the co-founder of the Climate Knowledge Collective and a professor at Stony Brook, not too far from here, who's a long-term member of GEDA, as well as the Women and Gender constituency. So while I'm getting your slides up, Adrián, can you tell us about Ruta del Clima's work on producing gender and environment data, including this upcoming project on gender indicators for loss and damage?
Yeah, okay. Now, first of all, thank you everybody for coming, and also thank you for the space. We are, as an NGO, extremely happy to be here and to be able to share the work that we do. So one of the things to okay. To explain, we work on loss and damage. We work in Central America and Colombia. We work with communities, frontline communities in Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, Costa Rica, and we collaborate with NGOs in Colombia also. And we have been working for the past 5 years on understanding how loss and damage impacts people. And I'll give this to Jenny, because it's behind me. First of all, our team is mainly women researchers, and unfortunately they couldn't be here. Only Jenny from communications, but they didn't get the visa on time, so I would rather not be here talking about this. But anyways, mostly when we go to communities, it's mostly women that are facing climate change, that are organized and doing something, and that talk to us and provide the data. But on the issue of loss and damage, not only there is no finance, but there is also no methodology. So we have been speaking for the past 5 years, trying to gather data, qualitative data on what is going on from their perspectives. But there is no real metric that we can feel. There is no from the UNFCCC a place where this data gets gathered, analyzed. There's just numbers in the MDCs of how much damage it has caused. So there is no information being generated by governments. So we know that there's some countries that are moving to generate indicators, but we felt that it's needed from our side because we also know that our countries have no capacity of generating this data. Municipalities might have just one person to deal with everything environmental, social environmental issues. So we have begun to generate a way to classify the different impacts of climate change on loss and damage that communities that are experiencing. But then our team and we reflected that there is no indicators that might help us then to generate disaggregated data. And it was clearly something that we had to do because we have a very gender conscious team, which is mainly women working mainly women in communities, but no way to methodologically gather data on these communities with these women that we're working on. So this is one of the challenges that we have. So first, we generated our own indicators, have developed a system of gathering information with community. We just launched an app to start gathering data directly with them using citizen science. So we're trying to merge citizen science with the traditional social science work. And then we have the challenge also of trying to gather other data, either socioeconomic data, statistical data, climate science data, to validate what we have in the ground and to be able to bridge this gap between what is climate change and what is climate variability, and to be able not only to validate what they're saying, but eventually to be able to say, well, let's start then doing community-led projects to address loss and damage. and to validate why are these solutions that are being put forward by people in the community the correct ones, and why they should be funded, and why do they have a political demand to ask for action. And this is the core of our work, and unfortunately, most of where we work, there is no data, there is no precipitation data, climate modeling is in large scale, so, and either data is inaccessible because the government does not share it, or they just have no capacity and have never actually reported it. So for us, working with people to validate what is happening on the ground is what moves us forward, and is one of the core elements of our work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adrián. To say the least, we are really excited about this project, and we'll be keeping everyone posted as it develops and as we learn more from Adrián and the team. So next, we're going to hear from Peg Spitzer, talking to us about feminist data methodologies and the recently created Climate Knowledge Collective. So Peg, can you tell us what is the role of feminist data methodologies in improving climate research and policy?
Thank you, Katie, and I'm really excited about your project. It's wonderful. These local projects are particularly important to us. So thanks very much for the invitation to be on the panel and speak briefly. I guess the very best thing I can do is introduce the Climate Knowledge Collective, CKC, which is a brand new nonprofit, officially 1 month old, I might add, that's comprised of a team of researchers from wide-ranging disciplines: cultural anthropology, history, law, sociology, art and design, library science, sustainability studies, human rights, and climate advocacy. So from this very interesting and important wide-ranging disciplines, we are together to document, preserve, uplift, and share oral histories of environmental resilience and innovation with a focus on feminist knowledge. But what are feminist methodologies? This is the question here, within the context of oral history, and how can they improve climate research and policy? That's what we're really focusing on. So first is that this methodology shifts the focus away from a simple Q&A format to an informal conversation. Sort of what we could have here, especially in the second part of this time here, that establishes a rapport and a way to share information and accurately capture and then promote the voices of women and marginalized communities. Feminist methodologies advocate for increasing climate activist visibility. They often are not acknowledged, as you know. To do this, CKC conducts interactive and comprehensive oral history interviews with follow-up clarifications for the interviewee to make changes as they see fit, which is very significant and important. Our team then conducts in-depth historical research to provide context and grounding to create ArcGIS, geospatial story maps, and data visualizations. So the next slide, there we go. So it should be slide 2, there we go. So as one member described it, our team essentially helps collect qualitative data. It tries to help solve complex problems, excuse me. Oh, thank you, great. All right, I'm gonna hope that that's the one. And authentically gather oral histories. And then, of course, amplify the voices of those on the front lines of the climate crisis. So we document our conversations that do not take from, but rather interact with community activists to co-create stories and narratives around climate change solutions. In essence, we learn from each other. As one member of GEDA states, climate activists must be the owners of their own data. Our protocol, in fact, is to ensure that the interviewees own the copyright to all the material that they produce. Very, very significant here. As part of our learning process, a member of our team who was conducting interviews in Senegal observed that typically we begin with a standard set of interview questions But then as the interview proceeds, we radically revise these questions during the interview. For example, to reconfigure the word family to accord with the understanding of that concept of family that's held by fisherwomen in the Saloum Delta of Senegal. Very different concepts. In sum, a feminist methodology uses open-ended questions, audio recordings of the interviews, detailed transcripts, and extensive fact-checking with multiple sources, and then integrates the historical events to compose the final narratives, which you'll be able to find on our website. So all the materials are to be held in the Stony Brook University, my university libraries, digital collection under the title Shifting Paradigms for Environmental Social Justice. With the goal of improving research and policy, a feminist reflexive methodology intentionally incorporates experiences, emotions, and ideas into the oral history narrative. So CKC's goal is to gather this narrative evidence to inform decision-making, especially in relationship to public reasoning as part of a pluralistic evidence base. So here's an example, I think, of a brief word visualization. There we go. That researchers and policymakers may use to delve into the oral histories to allow them to locate and then cross-reference the information from activists from around the world, so that this type of cross-referenced metadata helps set priorities to establish vital connections. Using these various tools then, the Climate Knowledge Collective works to ensure that the results of our oral histories are passed down to successive generations over many generations, so that it's possible for researchers and policymakers to understand the way frontline communities are led by feminist activists. So our goal then is really to provide a knowledge sharing platform for climate activists worldwide to share solutions, to be in community with others leading similar work, whether it's around the corner or across the planet, especially for those who use traditional ecological knowledge, TEK, as I'm sure many of you know, to address climate challenges. Yep. So as one of our team members notes here then, our goal really is to create a multi-purpose tool that elevates grassroots community-led solutions, to build resilience in the face of ever-increasing impacts, and to share information and data about real, proven, and commonly, as we've talked about, underfunded solutions. It's very better for our time here together because you can use the QR code to go into the website, but it's it's such a great, I mean, I have to say, but it's really a great effort because of so many amazing people that have helped pull this together. So thank you.
So thank you again, Peg and Adrián, for sharing about your work. Before we get to the reception, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but we do have an opportunity for Q&A. So if you have questions for any of our speakers or something you'd like to add to the discussion, we can run a mic to you. We have about 10 minutes, I would say, for Q&A. Yeah, right here in front.
Thank you. My name is Frida Cathcart, and I'm from Virginia, and I'm a corporate shareholder activist. And I was curious about, like, and I'm impressed with all of your work. Thank you. Thank you so much. I was curious, especially when you're mentioning the different disciplines. You did mention the insurance industry, and that's that my background's in insurance and finance. And you want to talk about the people that have the data when it comes to especially property and casualty, which is essentially losing buildings and losing lives and people getting hurt. That's the insurance industry that's going to have those numbers. And they published a report back in 2012 raising a red flag about the direction that things are going. And the natural enemy of the fossil fuel industry is the insurance industry, just like it was with tobacco and a lot of other different things. So I'm just curious, have you had any connections with the insurance industry yet, or?
Not yet.
All right, well, let me,
Yeah, we need to get connected. It's actually very interesting. Another study that I did on oral histories of women in US-Asian relations. We did oral histories of a woman who founded an insurance company in China that was really focused on women's maternal health, and it was really fascinating. So I would love to know more about that.
And I was just looking at the insurance industry as far as, when it comes to gender equity in the industry, it's like 58% women, and leadership is 12%.
Yeah.
So it's taking a while.
Another question or intervention?
Thank you all, fabulous, and I think if librarians are brought to the table, we've really got an edge. I'm interested in hearing from whoever it lands with, to think with us a little more about the way that citizens with a cell phone around the world can be galvanized and included. What kinds of portals into the projects that you are all curating might be a possible way to ramp this up to an onslaught of a kind of collective citizen involvement, global citizen, and what kind of questions would we want to have there? And so this would be a larger scale of what you're talking about, because we really need to let the local become the global, because it is happening everywhere. And then how would we also preserve in that pieces like the indigenous perspective, that if we don't come from an old language in a new way, by incorporating actual language, you know what I'm saying? So that our data is actually not colonized to begin with. So those are my two thoughts for you.
This is a very complex issue that we try to address. And for example, if you go to indigenous peoples in my country, they have super high speed internet in their like community facilities. But if you go to Guatemala, they don't. But and it's really hard to get them to use the phone, and they're not so familiar. But if you go to El Salvador, even you're in a poor community, then or Honduras, then they really know how to use it, even though it's very old phones. So it changes a lot from country to country. And one of the things that we face when we're doing the classifications and the development of the app is like we wanted a lot of data, but we also have to refrain ourselves on getting all the things we want because we don't want to overwhelm it or overwhelm people. And also when we're doing capacity building, because we sit down with people, our team sits down with the people and shows them that app. People don't want to get things wrong. So people are really into giving accurate data. And that sometimes is a challenge because then they don't want to learn by making mistakes. So overcoming that is also a challenge. So it is like a give and take of how much do you want to ask, but how much is too much. How much is you want to pressure them to be able to make mistakes because you don't want mistakes all the time. And also, for example, our classification is open. It's just a first stage. We have to then review it, work it, learn, add things because, for example, depending where you are, then you find different impacts that you never thought of. I mean, for example, if you go to the Andean communities, then they dress white to match the color of the glaciers, and now the glaciers are melting, so they cannot dress white. It makes no sense. But if you go to communities closer to warmer places, then, for example, women, for example, in Colombia are affected because there's no water in the river, and they used to do moon baths, and they cannot take a bath in the river because you have no water. So this whole spiritual thing. So those are things that I've never imagined. Because I've never seen a glacier and I've never do moon bath in my life. But so it's so complex. So you have to constantly match reality, and that is the special thing that this whole idea of working with people brings into the discussion of climate change, because we are unaware of different impacts that are happening between the relationship of people and ecosystem, from food that is not there, from traditions that are being missed, from things that are being lost, and you have to then adjust that to be able to capture it, but also respecting the times and the moments, and also not being extractive, is being able to provide something back to them that this becomes useful, and without also making them feel that you're looking into hurt, what has hurt them. So there is a lot of self-regulation as a researcher that you have to have, even though you want facts and you want to picture a reality, but you have to refrain yourself also. So it is not an easy task to do. Great, thank you.
Can I just add something really quick? And then because one of the things that you said is really super important, I think, and that is, you know, these small community projects are really working so hard to get funding. And yet we also have to take into account the fact that failure is okay. And I think that when you're trying to, you know, write a proposal, a funding proposal, for example, for a project, you can't talk about the failures that you go through and the things that you develop. So that's why I think that that has to be integrated into the picture as well.
You have unleashed a whole new conversation. So can I also add something? Because I think this is so important. And how do you bring the local to the global, right? I just want to say, we established a collaborative. It's now almost, what, a year and a half on citizen data. And it started with 10 entities, and now, you know, we call them the steering committee. And we have UN organizations, civil society organizations, academia, and brought together. And the idea is really to use what you're doing at the local level and bring that into more of the official, or, you know, the statistical system, and see how we can create, we call it now a framework. We launched a Copenhagen framework for citizen data, where we're trying to reflect all these different experiences, right? And see, you know, how can we support those initiatives that are very local, are very sometimes small, sometimes bigger, sometimes are only focused on a particular group, a particular indigenous group, or LGBTQI community, or whatever. But how do we make them then part of a global system, right? How do we reflect that and we bring it together? And what the collaborative is doing now, and we just received a little bit of funds, talking about funding, to also be able not only to implement this framework, bring capacity to civil society organizations, to community. And it's not just about the app. It's not always the cell phone, right? It can be different ways, different approaches, depending on where you are. But the idea is that all of that can be validated, can be then integrated into bigger data systems so that it becomes visible. And ultimately, what we would like to also have is a hub. You mentioned the hub, where all these different data sources can be brought together. And sometimes maybe they cannot be used for, you know, to inform a policy, but they can be sort of red flagging, right? They can be used to sensitize national statistical offices that those data need to be collected, that their particular community has a voice and has issues that need to be measured, that are not necessarily visible. As you said, you didn't even know, right? There's some issues that we're not even aware, because those are people that are traditionally overlooked, invisible in official data. So that's the idea. And I think, you know, I'm learning a lot from so much work that's been done, and I think we can join forces.
Amazing, thank you. I think we need to start wrapping up, so maybe if we can just keep going down the line, Katherine, and then Deepshikha, if you have any final thoughts you want to share.
I don't know if I have anything specifically to that, besides libraries are very cool. But no, I do feel like, you know, just again on that kind of funding and resourcing for this, I really appreciated the conversation around that citizen data collection and considering, you know, how do we get more resourcing to the people who are on the ground, who are unfortunately maybe experiencing these impacts, but also doing the firsthand collection for a lot of these data points, who are, you know, bringing those connections together for the very first time. And I was just thinking about an elder relative, Casey Camp Hornick, we were talking about, you know, the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous relatives and how that relates to the fossil fuel industry, and how we can bring that forward. And, you know, we're really talking about the people who are collecting what's happening there are the people that are experiencing it, and how are we supporting those, I like citizen data collectors. I was calling them grassroots scientists. I don't, you know, we can find a lot of different words for that, and just really considering, you know, how are we bringing resources to that level for that type of collection, but also supporting that at a broader scale. Again, kind of thinking about that very local piece to what does it mean to identifying those intersections and providing resources and working collaboratively to ensure that that's heard at this broader scale, that it's heard at the UNFCCC, that it's also maybe thought about in consideration with other countries as well. I know that there's a lot of really wonderful data, grassroots data, and Indigenous-led data around that topic in the United States, in North America, and we also hear those stories from relatives, you know, in South America, in Indonesia, in all of these other places where it's happening, but we maybe don't have those data points either. So how can it also support data collection in these other countries or these other communities that are experiencing and facing that same thing? So those are sort of what I'm leaving with here. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Katherine. Go ahead, Deepshikha.
Yeah, just, I won't take much of your time, but I really like your idea on the local, inclusion. So I'm sure everybody is aware of the local-led adaptation process, which is happening for quite some years now. And it is very, very specific and very targeted also to the indigenous community. And it's a very good idea. And we at, also in my previous organization, we work very closely with them. And it's like the idea is to integrate the local knowledge and actually to find the solutions with the communities, to develop those solutions with the communities. It has to be locally led so that it's not what directly just we are impostering on them, like, you know, just putting on the table. So that is one of the ways. And just recently, and I forgot to mention it, we are now opening, actually we have opened today only, launched one of the expression on interest where we are inviting different CSOs to participate and put in some of the, you know, if they are interested, and you can see some small black cards with the QR codes on the case study. So we want to develop and the case study specifically linking with the climate change and the different issues related to gender, related to SRH, climate, health, and other issues. So yeah, that's on that note. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Let's have another round of applause for her. Much. It's been so wonderful to hear a little bit more about your perspectives and your work, and really makes me proud to be co-convening GEDA. So to close us out, I'm going to invite my colleague Bonnie Bardwaj, who is co-president and co-lead of the Gender and Climate Justice Circle at Society for Gender Professionals. And Bonnie's also on GEDA's first elected steering committee with a 2-year term ongoing. So Bonnie, thanks, and over to you.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you everybody for being here today. And the panels were really informative and encompassing quantitative, qualitative data, and I had a lot to learn. So doing a just transition to our networking session now. Let's go ahead and see how we network today. So let's find a new friend today in the room and take a selfie together with the Instax cameras that are provided outside. Right? Because we would need the selfie here. And the placard says gender environment data matters to us because. And we have realized that there are different perspectives that all of us approach particular gender environment nexus and how we can create these interconnections and convergences. So that is something that we can consolidate in the next, I think, 45 minutes or so. And so yeah, thank you for today's session and looking forward to the networking session. And all the resources are there on the counter. Thank you.
Thank you.